When we talk about preventing war, we usually think in terms of defense, soldiers, satellites, and a large spending budget. We picture conflict as something to be stopped with force, or the threat of it. But what if one of the most powerful tools for peace wasn't the military at all? What if it was a school, a job, a sense of dignity? Desperation without hope is dangerous. It turns frustration into fury. It turns suffering into something that seeks meaning, even if that meaning comes wrapped in violence. And here's the crucial part. Desperation doesn't happen in a vacuum. It's almost always worsened, sometimes caused by bad governance. Governments that abuse their own people, that fail to provide jobs, safety, or justice, that leave entire generations feeling like the future is already stolen. When basic systems break down, extremism steps in to offer an alternative, even if that alternative is a lie. We've seen this before. After World War I, the Treaty of Versailles didn't just end a war. It crushed Germany's economy and national identity. The Allies demanded reparations so massive they destabilized the country's entire financial system. Hyperinflation made savings worthless. In 1923, a loaf of bread cost a wheelbarrow full of paper money. Unemployment soared. Political unrest exploded in the streets. In that fragile, broken state, Germany elected a man who promised to restore greatness by finding someone to blame. He rose not in strength, but in the vacuum left by weakness and despair. That pattern continues today. There are places where people live under blockade, where clean water is scarce, where electricity cuts out daily, and where hope feels more like folklore than a future. Places where a teenager might graduate high school into unemployment, frustration, and the pull of groups that promise belonging and change, even through violence. In those places, it's not ideology that pulls people towards extremism. It's survival and a sense of injustice. The United Nations Development Programme's 2023 report, Journey to Extremism in Africa, Pathways to Recruitment and Disengagement, reinforces what earlier research warned, but with even starker findings. 73% of recruits of violent extremist groups said their government was doing a poor job providing employment, and 31% were in urgent need of livelihood opportunities when they joined. 71% cited government action, like the killing or arrest of family or friends, as the tipping point that pushed them to join. And for many who joined quickly, the study notes that it wasn't ideology driving them, but something more primal. Specifically, it said that it was anger and fear that featured prominently among those who joined more quickly, while those who took longer to join were more motivated primarily by hope for change, highlighting the appeal of violent extremism groups as offering an opportunity for radical change or to rebel against the status quo. State action and inaction was a prominent catalyst. This is why I keep using that word despair, because the people in this study weren't born fanatics. They were disillusioned younger people shaped by instability and left without alternatives. Now, I really want to make this clear before I move on. None of what I am outlining here is excusing any violence. Understanding the conditions that breed extremism is not the same as excusing what those extremists do. We don't look at 1930s Germany and say, well, their economy was bad, so Hitler gets a pass. No. The world was right to stop him. The cost of doing nothing would have been unthinkable. And the same applies today. Acknowledging the suffering that feeds radicalization doesn't mean we tolerate what comes out of it. It doesn't mean we let death cults kidnap civilians, launch terror attacks, or use children as human shields. It doesn't mean we say, well, they're angry, so what do you expect? We can recognize root causes and still demand accountability. We can treat despair as a warning sign, not as a justification. The point isn't to excuse violence. The point is to try and avoid the next war before it starts by cutting off the supply of despair that fuels it. And this kind of thing isn't just about geopolitics. We see these same principles hold up in things like public safety. What reduces corruption in police forces and public service around the world? Not just stricter rules, but better pay and working conditions. A 2001 study from the International Monetary Fund found that raising civil servant wages significantly reduced corruption, especially where oversight was weak. When people have something to lose, a steady paycheck, a pension, stability, they're less likely to risk it. Now apply that to whole populations. People with stability defend it. This is where foreign aid comes in, because when we talk about preventing conflict, it's not just about defense, it's about resilience. You don't need to wait for a drone strike to win a war. Sometimes you just need to build a school. When a young person gets an education, they're less likely to be recruited by extremist groups. When communities have clean water and functioning infrastructure, resentment towards the state decreases. When families have jobs and stability, they become defenders of peace, not pawns of chaos. Foreign aid helps create those conditions. And yes, there are risks. Yes, aid can be misused or stolen by corrupt officials. But when foreign aid is targeted, transparent, and long-term, the return on investment is stability. We've seen this work before, and we'll explore those examples next. After World War II, much of Europe was shattered, not just physically, but economically and psychologically. The US launched the Marshall Plan, an enormous aid effort to rebuild the economies of Western Europe, restore industry, and stabilize governments. And it worked. In just 4 years, the US sent over $13 billion, more than probably $150 billion today, to help Europe recover. That investment didn't just help feed people and rebuild cities, it helped prevent the spread of communism, rebuild allies, and create decades of peace among former enemies. In Asia, South Korea offers another success story. After the Korean War, the country was one of the poorest in the world, but through strategic aid focused on education, industrial development, and institution building, South Korea didn't just survive, it became one of the most advanced economies on the planet. Today, South Korea is a democracy, a tech powerhouse, and a major U.S. ally. Once an aid recipient, it now gives aid to others. These weren't acts of charity, they were acts of vision. They turned despair into stability, they turned instability into partnership, and they helped win peace before the next war could begin. And while the West at present debates whether to continue in their programs of development aid, China is reshaping alliances one shipping container at a time. Through its Belt and Road initiative, China is building infrastructure across more than 150 countries. Roads, ports, telecoms. It funds airports and power plants and fiber optic lines. These projects come with low-interest loans, but also strings attached. While the projects aim to improve infrastructure and connectivity, some analysts suggest they can create debt traps, where countries struggle to repay the loans, giving China leverage. Take Sri Lanka, whose Habentoda port, I hope I said that name okay, is now on a 99-year lease to Beijing. While it's not always a debt trap, it's undeniably a strategy. This isn't charity, it's chess. While we hesitate over whether to help build a school, China is building the next century's economic alliances. If we step back, they step in, not with weapons, but with asphalt, contracts, and long-term influence. And sometimes the West doesn't give, it punishes. I want to kind of give this different viewpoint just to show that the Western world can have a major impact through economic measures. And sanctions even have their place. When used well, they apply pressure without any violence. Think of sanctions against South Africa to help end apartheid, or current sanctions against Russia in response to its war in Ukraine. These sanctions have goals: to push regimes to change without collapsing civilian life. But when sanctions are used to purely punish without a path forward, they don't just hurt governments, they break economies, they break people. And that's what happened after World War I, like we already talked about. Sanctions and crushing reparations devastated Germany's economy, helping pave the way for extremism. We know how that ended. The lesson? Pressure without purpose is a trap. Aid with purpose is a strategy. Foreign aid is often framed as soft, idealistic, or even wasteful. But when done right, it's one of the most cost-effective tools we have to build a safer, more stable world. This isn't just about helping others. It's about protecting ourselves from wars that haven't started, from crises that haven't escalated, and from threats that don't make headlines until it's too late. We don't secure freedom by accident. We secure it by making sure desperation doesn't become destiny. So yes, send the aid. Not just because it's kind, but because it's smart. Because the next war might already be planting its roots. And the best way to stop it might be clean water, a school book, or a stable job.